game now. Me and you, we ain't the same now. Lions coming out to play now. Opposition out the way now. Out of the way, you wasn't invited. Say you come to play, I dare you to try it. You don't wanna try me, then step up to my team. Yeah, out of the way, yeah, yeah. Out of the way, yeah, yeah. Out of the way. Game now, me and you, we ain't the same now. Lions coming out to play now. Opposition out the way now. Out of the way, you wasn't invited. Say you come to play, I dare you to try it. You don't wanna try me, then step up to my team. Yeah, out of the way, yeah, yeah. Out of the way, yeah, yeah. Out of the way.
It's the season finale for 60 plus racing adventures, and it takes us to the Nordschleife, Nürburgring, Germany. A really challenging track to bring home this season 22 of one of the most unique sim racing leagues and championships in existence, specifically for drivers 60 years of age or over. This is a league that features some fantastic racing and fantastic competition amongst the elder statesmen of the iRacing service and the sim racing world. What it gives us is a view into how iRacing and sim racing opens this door to everyone to keep competing, to keep racing, and age is no barrier to sim racing passion. This league shows us that time and time again. So welcome along to RaceSpot coverage with me, David Haynes, Dane Baird alongside me here at the Nordschleife. Dane, it is a really challenging track. It's high slipstreaming and high stakes in places. And we bring the Indy Pro 2000 here, as we always do every round of this championship.
Yeah, literally every single season we go to the Nordschleife, and it is always a fantastic round. It is my personal favorite racetrack, not just on iRacing, but just in the world in general. The biggest challenge that they'll face all season long. You can see what they've already been facing up until this point. We saw them in round one at Road Atlanta. We saw them at Laguna Seca and how they handled those challenges. The Nürburgring Nordschleife, completely different beast.
Yeah, exactly. So another look back at the schedule as it's been. We brought you RaceSpot coverage of round one at Road Atlanta. We checked in with them at Laguna Seca. Since then, they've been to Gateway, Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, Phillip Island, Road America, and most recently on the oval at Phoenix. Now, it all comes to a head. The end of the 12-week championship. This is what it looks like. Russ Addy leading the way from John Morgan and Paul Stump, and then your top 10 completed by Stephen Greenwood, Bob Cohen, Mike McCormick, Donald Fitterer, Mike Grandy, Marcel Sproining, and Bruce Poole. Some very, very familiar and long-running names here. And we've also got to give a shout-out to John Morgan leading the Super 70s Championship there as well, I think. So he is, I think, a real inspiration to all of us that there could be a lot of legs left in our sim racing enjoyment for many, many decades still to come, the way that he still competes right at the front of this championship.
Yep, absolutely. He's very impressive stuff from all of the drivers out here, but definitely up in those in the Super 70s. It's just on another level completely, and right up at the front of 60 plus racing adventures as well. So doing a fantastic job for him, still in the championship contention as well. as qualifying is underway. Just a few minutes left of that, so the drivers will be making their way towards the end of their laps, and we can see just going through the chicane now, a couple of the drivers about to finish their flying laps. It's Roberto De Filippis, currently in 4th position at a 6:35.9, only about 5 seconds off of Morgan out in front. Usually 5 seconds is a huge gap over a lap at a racetrack, not when the lap is 6.5 minutes long.
Yeah, you've got to kind of change your frame of reference, sort of modify everything with sort of like a ×3 multiplier in your expectations around this circuit, given it is one of the largest, most challenging, most daunting laps that there is anywhere in the world. You can really only compare it to places like Le Mans or Isle of Man, potentially. It is almost without compare these days. And a very, very challenging place to qualify, with that said, because there are hundreds of corners trying to trip you up. And as we know on iRacing, in a qualifying session, you've got to be millimetre perfect. Any time you go off track and cut across the grass, that completely throws out that qualifying lap. You've got to be all 4 on the pavement, and that is a mighty, mighty challenge, with blind corners, fast corners, and just many corners around the gigantic lap here. But it is good to see at least 16 drivers so far have pinned a time to the qualifying board, and I can see as we ride on board with Steve Greenwood, he's definitely a chance to complete this lap if all goes well. I'm seeing Jerry Kerr, Michael Bailey, a couple others are still out there. Don't know if they're going to get the line on time. I don't know if they're on a clean lap so far, but for Steve Greenwood, he's through the final corner as we take the sort of industry Fahrten Nordschleife version, and for Greenwood, that qualifying takes him to 4th. So no Grand Prix circuit here, just the Nordschleife, as you see, with that final right-hand corner that keeps us just on the historic section without the Grand Prix pits.
And that right-hander serves as turn 1 for the race effectively, because usually what happens is, because the start-finish line is so close to the exit of that corner, you've not really completed the exit of the corner before you cross the line. Usually the leader's already gone by then, and so everybody else in the quite large field of drivers that we've got here today, they're all going through that side-by-side, jostling for position already. So it is a very crucial corner on the circuit. It's blind on entry because you've got the wall as your apex, so similar to a street circuit. And then on the exit, that grass, and not a whole ton of runoff either. So getting that one right is going to be really important for the drivers.
So Jerry Kerr, unfortunately, ran out of time on his qualifying lap. So there are 17 drivers with qualifying times. Maybe exceeded my expectations a little bit, but I guess slow and steady maybe is what gets you to 60 plus. Paul Stump, though, still showing great pace within our top 3 in the championship there. He's got pole position over John Morgan, who saw a 2nd in the championship, and Russ Addy's in 3rd, so almost just a top 3 invert on our championship standings will be the starting grid for race 1 of 2. It will be a rolling start. They're forming up behind the pace car on the Dottingerhöhe now, so the second row will be Russ Addy and Steve Greenwood. Then row 3 will be Bob Cohen and Barry Hills. Row after that, Mike McCormick and Roberto De Filippis. Got Ulf Olsen and Leif Hellberg on row number 5 there, and Bob Kern and Richard Coulomb are sharing row number 6 there, Dane.
Yep, and then in 13th, Peter Holstrom alongside Douglas Beasley. Then Mike Grandy and Eugene Clark in 16th position there. Oyvind Anderson in 17th. He'll line up alongside Marcellus Breuning in 18th. All of these drivers not setting a lap time now. Earl Setzer in 19th alongside Franz Brink at the end of row number 10. Robert Love in 21st, Michael Bailey in 22nd. They're followed by Jahadius Jorison and David Bradley.
Yep, Jerry Kerr, Gene Moore, and JC Hay round out the field. A weird little quirk of how iRacing sets the grid when you've got a big handful of drivers without qualifying times. So it goes by iRating. So in a league like this, iRating and your safety rating from official racing never matters except for this circumstance where you've got a large handful of drivers without a qualifying time, and then in the absence of anything else to tie break with, it goes by iRating. So lucky Marcellus Broining in 18th place. His 1,900 iRating means he's going to start from 18th instead of 27th. Kind of reminds me of Formula 1 and engine penalties almost.
Yeah, just like at the previous Grand Prix where Valtteri Bottas qualified P20, had 30 places worth of grid penalties, and because people in front of him had back of the grid penalties, which are more effective than grid penalties, he started 14th. So explain that one to someone who doesn't follow Formula 1.
I'm watching this pace lap, but we don't have time. But of course, yeah, the quirk there being the order in which people took penalties ended up setting the grid for a great number of the drivers towards the back there. Thankfully, of course, a truncated pace lap here on the Nürburgring Nordschleife, forming up on the Dottingerhöhe there near the sort of tourist pits, and then make our way towards the Tiergarten section here. We've got the final corner that they're about to go through, and then of course turn 1 becomes Sabina Schmidt's curve, but Paul Stump isn't going to leave them waiting. He's away, taking us racing for the season finale of 60 plus racing adventures at the Nordschleife. And cold tyres for everyone, a big handful in these open wheel cars, short wheelbase, very willing to rotate, but he's gotten away cleanly through that first corner. Down towards the Hudson back, they've already gone pretty well single file. Robert Love going to the back of the field. JC Hay, only driver who didn't take the start, but this is a great jump for Paul Stump. He's left everyone behind to slipstream and battle over each other, and he's pulled more than a second over John Morgan in second place behind him.
Pulling a gap is really important, especially on the first lap, because you've got the longest straight that they'll face the entire season long, the Dottinger, right at the very end of the lap. So if you can build up a good few seconds worth of a gap in this first lap, then you're not going to have anybody slipstreaming you down the straight. And we see this every single time that we visit the circuit. We'll often have 5, 6, 7 drivers in the train that quickly stops being a train and starts being 3, 4 wide as they make their way down there. So this is pretty much one of the only places that you can make a position up if you don't have the driver in front of you making a mistake. So we'll see if you can manage to keep that advantage throughout the rest of the lap. But so far, everyone's still keeping it nice and single file here.
Yeah, ding ding, everyone in the tram tracks. John Morgan is your conductor of this battle for second place. Russ Addy, as they got towards Arenberg there, was getting very close, maybe thinking about a move. Wasn't able to do it, but he's got Steve Greenwood and Bob Cohen right behind. Russ Addy's got that championship to think about. I think a top 3 in this race would almost seal it, because the quirk of the points championship is you take your best result of the 2 races into the championship race, into the championship standings. If you crash out of race 1, a good result in race 2 will be what points you take into the championship. So for Russ Addy, a good result in race 1 might be all it takes. Could be very much on his mind. He's won championships like this way before. Paul Stump now almost 3 seconds clear. John Morgan is just easing his way into this, and the slipstream is powerful in these cars at any circuit. We know there's quite a few long straights connected by some very, very challenging corners around here, but there are some high-speed places around this track.
And they're nearing their way up to one of them now. Just 3 or 4 corners, I'd say, until they reach the second real long section as they make their way onto the bridge here through the left-hand. Walls on either side, even closer than usual around this circuit. Very little runoff to speak of anywhere, but particularly there, wall very close on the outside. And they make their way up just a few corners to go through the left and then up through the right, and then we'll see that drafting continue once again. You can expect to see those cars close back up again.
Yeah, absolutely do. They're getting close to working their way through Bergwerk, and then it's a big flat out run, and crucially uphill as well after that part of the track that we see the drivers starting to navigate now through Kesselchen, I think it is there, absolutely flat out. Looking at Mike McCormick and Roberto De Filippis, and this is that slipstream as the cars top out on the straight uphill. The driver behind can get a really strong advantage, but it's a tough corner to pass through as you've got to commit through the lightning fast left-hander there.
They're coming up to the best part of the circuit, and that is by unanimous decision. Just coming up towards the
Like,
carousel, and then what
carousels weren't
follows
that
the
good.
carousel.
They
is
wouldn't
the
set
best
them up
part.
at every fair.
This is true. Out of the carousel, from here until pretty much the end of the lap, is just absolutely phenomenal. And it's also one of the trickiest parts to do in an open wheel car because they're super stiff. The suspension is designed for racetracks, not designed for foot-high curbs. If you clip any one of these throughout this high-speed section, it could well be game over before the race has really even begun. So making your way through here, super high speed, you've got to get it inch perfect. Otherwise, you end up in one of the barriers that is really, really close to the edge of the circuit here. Up through the right-handed, a little bit of extra tarmac you can use on the outside if you choose to. No one choosing to just yet. As they emerge from the trees, downhill through the S's, left, right. Fantastic part of the circuit.
Let's take a look at a replay. It's for Michael Bailey. So he comes towards, I think it's Clostertal there, and has a big lock-up. Finds that famous Armco. Plenty of spectators there as well to cheer or jeer, whatever it may be, but you are at really high speed at full throttle for a long run there, and he has done that braking a little late and caught a problem. Who else has had a problem there?
Richard Coulomb?
I'd say that's likely.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at Richard Coulomb. He does get a little bit of that curb you're talking about. Aggressive curb. This is a low sitting car and it does not abide that.
It's definitely one of the big challenges of driving the circuit are the curves, because if you just clip them, they can be really, really dangerous. But getting all over them in a GT car, fantastic. That's what you've got to do to be fast around here. In an open wheel car, you can't touch them at all. And that's what happens if you do. It just unsettles the car massively. And then off you go into the barrier. You can see the gap out in front is massive there, stumped in the background of that shot as the car's off it just after the mini carousel.
Yeah, for Peter Hallstrom, that suspension is no bueno. Paul Stump, that big advantage, like you said, keeping him safe on the Dottinghor, but it wasn't enough to keep John Morgan safe. Russ Addy slingshots past him into second place. John Morgan in third. Steve Greenwood's got a mega toe, and he's also going to pick off John Morgan. So Morgan held on really well along that lap. His rivals might have been just mentally waiting for that Dottinghor. Russ Addy and Steve Greenwood slingshotted past as they're going to start lap 2 of 5. Paul Stump leads by 3 seconds. And Addy and Greenwood have gotten through into those podium places now. A couple of drivers who were very cautious and careful and well considered at the start of the lap, just coming undone a little bit in the later sections. So that for Coulomb and others, but I think Peter Hallstrom and Morgan Anderson have also become unstuck quite late on in the lap.
It looks like Anderson's actually had a bit of a trouble right at the end of that lap there in the final couple of corners or so. So potentially an effect of some hard racing perhaps. As we have a look at the number 21 here through the last right. Oh, bit of contact, huge contact into the outside wall there. That's just coming onto the Dottinger, so right near the end of the circuit. That's taking both cars out of the race. It was Douglas Beasley alongside him.
Yeah, Beasley has a wiggle here, a big wiggle. In fact, he might have already been nursing a bit of damage there. And hello, across comes Oyvind Anderson. And both of them now big damage. And that's put both of them back to the pit lane. Paul Stump still 3 seconds in the lead. Greenwood's gotten past Addy for second here as well, so Greenwood picking off another spot, moving forward. It's teammates 1 and 2. I think they call themselves European Racing Motors or something of that like. You'll see both of them in what amounts to Lotus 80s kind of throwback livery there. And let me tell you, smoking is not cool for all the kids watching.
I'm just trying to figure out where he's made that move. It must have been down the straighter section. Yeah. very difficult place to make a pass. It's one of the better overtaking opportunities, but with this circuit, it's really challenging to make a move there because you've got the fast left-hander. Yeah, you're absolutely right. They'll go down the hill here. Had he got the movement before the corner, or does he have to go side by side? Because that's super tricky to do. Look at the speed in the draft, and he's going to just swoop around the outside here as they move up the hill, over the crest, and towards the left. I think it's just a bit of a back out there from the driver alongside him. Yeah, absolutely. And up in the second place he goes. And there's one of very, very few overtaking opportunities at this circuit.
Yeah, just a slightly better, more committed run across the sort of double apex there at the Flugplatz area. And using the slipstream to get alongside Russ Addy. Russ Addy, I think, is still thinking that kind of championship game. Mathematically, third place would probably do it in this race. He doesn't want to get crashed out. He doesn't want to end this race in the Armco. He wants to end it seeing that checkered flag. So Greenwood's momentum prevailed and Russ Addy rolled out of it a little bit. You still see these three together. Greenwood, Addy and John Morgan not letting him get anywhere. I do wonder, can Greenwood close the gap to Paul Stump at the front? Because it's stabilised now that these two have gotten past John Morgan. A little wide there for Greenwood.
Yep, and now into the carousel they'll go. They do take the banking here. Some cars, especially open wheel cars, it's often you get a bit of damage to the floor of your car if you go through there with too much speed. So they're slowing it right down and heading their way down there. That's why you got that little bit of a ring around the outside.
Porsche 919 Evo lap.
Yep.
And that stayed outside.
It did.
Which hurt me, like, spiritually. When I watched that video, I was like, yes, the fastest ever lap of the Nordschleife. And, oh.
It's just too flat. The car is so flat on the bottom that if you went through there, it's just going to rip it to pieces, which is, it's really sad, but at the same time, I'd rather have it set the fastest lap time into the N1 piece. Yeah, the fastest half a lap.
Maximise the suspension and the ride height for the other 129 corners at the expense of, you know, saddling up and riding the horses at the carousel.
Pretty stagnant as they make their way through the double right here. Such a tricky part of the circuit because all of this is completely blind. You cannot see a thing as to the next corner, even at this part, which looks relatively flat. So many crests everywhere that you can't really see where you're going, and it just takes a lot of trial and error to sort of figure out the best line through there. One of the very difficult parts of it is at the end of the circuit, so if you make a mistake, you got to go the entire way around the 6.5 minute lap to get back to there to try it again. So it makes the circuit so difficult to learn.
You need rally pace notes to get you started. You know, it's like tightens over crests, stay right, kind of.
Someone's done that. I saw it on a forum somewhere that someone had a friend that only did rally games and they wanted to try the Nordschleife, and they hopped on iRacing and their friend went around and built pace notes for the entire circuit, and then they did it like a rally station. It was super cool to see, and now this is also super cool to see as drivers make their way back onto the Dodginger. That's not so cool to see. Hellberg in the wall.
He was having a battle for 7th place with Ulf Olsen, Scandinavia versus Scandinavia, but here on the Doddinger, Russ Addy's going to get 2nd place back from Steve Greenwood and then have to muscle him out a little bit because it's so long. The driver who gets past can almost pop back into the slipstream and have a second bite at it. They slow down through the final part of the lap here, down into 2nd gear for this car, and Russ Addy now, as they start lap 3, is going to get that 2nd place. All this does, though, is play a bit into the hands of Paul Stump, now 3.5 seconds up front, and you saw he's picked up the fastest lap of the race as well. So this kind of could come down to who's positioned where when it gets to the final lap of the race. The way these three are going, trying to settle our podium places. A little bit of a lock-up, a little wide in the Hudson back here for Russ Addy, but there's a couple apexes and he'll get back to the racing line. this is what happened to Hellberg. He's following Ulf Olsen in front. Marcellus Breuning behind, I think. And yeah, you come over the crest there. He's caught just a little bit of the grass. Actually, that was Ulf Olsen who got through, I think. But he's found the Armco just by finding the outside tyres on the grass. This is where Steve Greenwood got past last time. He doesn't have the same kind of run, and they're going to go side by side down the hill here towards Schwedenkreuz. John Morgan gets to pick and choose, absolutely wheel to wheel, and it's Greenwood around the outside who has to back out of it, lest he see that red and white Armco close up towards him. So pretty willing stuff from both. Russ Addy manages to hold on, but there was nothing in it. They came across the crest towards the committed Schwedenkreuz corner. Nose to nose, absolutely level. Russ Addy, by virtue of having the inside, was the driver who didn't lift.
Almost exactly what we saw on the last lap, but this time Addy manages to stay ahead. But yeah, all of this does is just allow Stump to extend that advantage. You can see him in the background of the shot there. Massive gap to the drivers behind, and now really close behind is Greenwood, really following Addy through here. Morgan's just behind these two as well, isn't able to make anything happen this time, but still just hanging on the back, sticking with them. And these three have got quite a hefty gap behind them as well. So we'll see if they manage to hold on to that through this next lap. And next sort of overtaking opportunity is going to be back up the hill again once they reach there. But not a great overtaking spot, despite the fact you can get a ton of speed going up the hill there. It's really narrow and some pretty quick corners through there.
Had a great view from John Morgan there in fourth place, just looking forward at this battle between Russ Addy and Steve Greenwood. I always find that right-hander there very challenging. There's always a sort of crest at the apex, the rear of the car. In every car ever wants to kick out there.
Yep, and it's the last thing you can get away with. Actually, I did
everywhere
that
between the apex and the track out point.
Nürburgring 24-hour, that's where my race ended. Through that right-hander, over the crest, got a bit loose, spun it around, didn't hit the wall, but every single car on the circuit behind me hit me.
Goes Greenwood around the outside at Kesselchen. That is a bit of a new one for me. Track goes right and Russ Addy drops back in. You've got this bravery corner here. Near to flat out in these cars. I think Russ Addy saw his life flash before his life a tiny bit there, because you can so easily push wide, get the grass. You're going very fast with absolutely no room to save it. And the straight here, lock up from Greenwood, but it's not enough to let Russ Addy get back underneath in the very short straight towards the carousel, and Greenwood can just park it on the inside there so long as he hooks this banking. No dramas. I've got two kidneys. I think I'd give one to watch the Nürburgring 24 with a caravan in the middle of the carousel there.
Such a good spot. I have to agree with you there. That is like massive racing bucket list thing right there. Get to the carousel, brush it at night when you got all the bonfires and all that going through there, all the headlights of the cars as well. I know a couple of people who went last year. Definitely going to try and make that happen for next year. See if I can get myself over to the Nürburgring. Absolutely great place to watch racing, because you can get so close to it, because there's no runoff anywhere.
Where in the UK are you again?
You can get really close. Sort of right in the middle, just outside London, so not too far of a drive.
I put to you, you're probably closer to the Nürburgring than I am.
Maybe just a little bit, yeah.
Like, as the crow flies, I don't have to get on any, ferries or trains in tunnels to get to Bathurst.
Yeah, I'm probably a little bit closer to the Nürburgring than you are to the Nürburgring as well.
Oh, Ulf Olsen has a really wide moment in almost the only place that you've got a couple of meters to the barriers. Right there, that's the exit of Ice Curve, I think, and it sees Marcellus Breuning get through up into 7th place as Olsen is probably going to have a change of pants moment there, but I think the car will be okay.
Yeah, I think that is a very impressive save that's just been made there, because it's very difficult to actually get the car a turn on the grass on iRacing, especially not when the wall is so close and you have such a small amount of room.
Greenwood weaves to defend, but Russ Addy's got 5 more kilometres an hour right now, and as they start to top out 6th gear, look at that Christmas tree lit up for Russ Addy. He's got all the speed, especially as the circuit goes a little bit uphill towards the bridge here. Addy through, nose into second, but they both stall out at VMAX, and I think that pays into the favour of Russ Addy. He goes into second. Greenwood can't get back through. He'll sit in third. John Morgan's still got the slipstream on these two guys as they work their way through the Tiergarten chicane area, through the final corner. But not to start the final lap. There's 2 more to go for your leader, Paul Stump, just in front. You can see him as well. All race they've been able to see Paul Stump, but they haven't been able to catch him, and they haven't been able to pick that slipstream.
Just through this part of the circuit where there's walls close to it everywhere, of course, but just through this part where it's quite twisty, you can just about see just the back of the car sneak behind the next barrier as you make your way around the apex of the previous corner. Here's your battle for 11th, and lovely move being made there. Oh, Brink might be able to get back at him here into the slipstream. He's a little bit too far back there, probably just sitting back for the time being. But you said it in lap 1, it is definitely possible, and it does happen quite often, where the driver making the pass immediately gets passed back again down the Dottinger. It is that long. So there's the car behind. It's sort of your responsibility to make sure that you don't give them that opportunity the second that you come back by. And here, less than car length separating these two drivers. Once again, Addy and Greenwood going at it in this part of the circuit. Greenwood has to sit back once again, so Addy holds on for now.
Yeah, it sure does. The one thing that maybe saves them is the car in the slipstream sometimes hits that rev limiter in the tallest gear, which kind of cuts their speed advantage a little bit. Sort of cuts the ability of the driver to then do the second leapfrog sort of thing. You're seeing Paul Stump get a bit more defensive. Sorry, Russ Addy get a little more defensive than he had been in previous times. Sort of running the middle of the road there towards Schwedenkreuz. A very, very fast left-hander across the crest and defending that. Just where Greenwood got him on a previous time. John Morgan sticks with them as well. So for Paul Stump, it's sort of a matter of manage his little lead. 4 to 4.5 seconds, ebbs and flows depending on the section of the lap they're in.
We're just riding on board with Stump for a second then. You, looking backwards, couldn't see the front of Russ Addy. So that gap finally just at that point where through certain parts of the circuit, through quite a lot of the circuit, Addy has absolutely no visual on the car in front, and it's a little bit demoralizing at that point. There's a little bit of the curb on the outside there, gets away with it, and then through the right-hander up here. So hard to get on the power, as we spoke about with that crest there. And Greenwood about half a second just sitting in behind. Any closer than that, and you're just going to get dirty air. And that's pretty much the last thing that you want, especially through that second half of the circuit. You want to just tuck back in nice and close before you get onto the long Dottinger straight at the end of the circuit.
And the drivers tell us that these sort of 30-40 minute races do start to test the longevity of the tyres.
Yeah.
Not that they, wear out and wear down, but what they do is just start to lose some of their best. There's no line there for Steve Greenwood as he tried to get past Russ Addy, and they got so close. Greenwood did a little bit of the mowing.
I think Russ Addy is just seeing his life flash before his eyes there in the championship lead, but that would have made things a little bit more difficult for us. If that had gone a little bit worse there, wow.
little troubles, both of them there. Addy had a lock-up. Greenwood, demonstrating what I was kind of just talking about, he had a wiggle on throttle application. So these rear tyres go from sort of great grip to just good grip at about this point in these races, and the drivers have just got to measure their throttle application a little bit more, just got to be more conscious of unwinding the hands before they apply the throttle. You've got quite a lot of grip from these tyres and the wide track, but not an infinite amount of grip. And what this Indy Pro 2000 has got is the most power anyone ever put in an F4 chassis, with just short of 300 horsepower. It's about 275-ish, give or take some, which is enough to get you in trouble.
Riding on board with John Morgan, just sitting behind the two drivers that we've been focusing on for most of the races, because they're the closest drivers out on the circuit as it stands, and through the ups and downs of Flansgarden, and now making their way up towards that mini carousel, which is the end of the best part of the circuit. Kind of ruins it a little bit, but once again, only half a second separating them, and this is where things will get interesting, because this is the last chance that the drivers will get to lead into the start of the lap. So whether
Greenwood out wide, he finds the grass, he finds the wall, a mistake that we've seen others make already. Very cautious from John Morgan. He didn't want to get involved in anyone else's accident, and what that means is they've dropped a big handful of seconds to Russ Addy there. John Morgan got all the way out of it. You can see your top four with the long shot down the multiple kilometres of the Doddinger Hoor. So for Greenwood, he rode along the wall, but doesn't appear to have too much damage because he's gone back past John Morgan. Here's how it happens. Through the little carousel, all good here. Aggressive jump out of the exit to try to carry the speed. And then what he does is tries to carry as much speed as he can at the top of the hill here. Not enough front grip, it washes out wide, and that finds the grass. He just has a very square-on boot with the Armco. Keeps going, and then tucks into the slipstream of John Morgan and gets back past him, back up into third. Spreads out our leaders. Paul Stump here, starting the final lap of the race, has 4 seconds in his back pocket. He jumped out to a lead at the race start, and he's not really had to look in his mirrors since. He's had to maybe monitor the times. Greenwood's had another problem though, another mistake, more grass, more Armco. Now he's facing the wrong way back there, dropping from third into fourth place. That's facing the wrong way. Oh, he's not been able to get it going, so some aggressive moves, some of the highlights of the race for Steve Greenwood, but it's all come undone just as he started the final lap of the race. Here he is in the Hudson back, pushing, trying to catch Russ Addy for second place. In through here, rear lets go. He's spinning it around. He gets the grass. He doesn't seem like he even actually gets the wall, but then he's facing the wrong way. He's watching cars come at him, and he decides it's a very difficult place to get going again. So it's the change of direction. Whoop.
Yep, and around that car goes, and then it's
so last laps matching each other for Paul Stump and Russ Addy. Both of them are 6:29.1, and as we talked about, this is a big lap, so for their lap times to be that close is rare and unheard of. And of course John Morgan lost a little bit of time as he was behind Greenwood, the corner that leads onto the Doddinger Hoor, so that spaces them out. Bob Cohen in fourth, but there's been a couple big movers deeper in this field. We talked about how many drivers weren't able to set a qualifying time. It was, you know, one lap, one shot, one opportunity. Any tyre on the grass anywhere invalidates your lap time, and this is one of those guys. Big move. No qualifying time for Gerhardus Jorgensen. I don't think we've seen him make any big, crazy moves, but here he is from, oh gosh, I'm doing maths in my head. Things are setting on fire. 23rd on the grid-ish, up into 7th place. And Jerry Kerr is much easier mental maths. 25 on the grid, up into 10. This is another one of those drivers without a qualifying time, but keeping themselves on the circuit and running at what is undoubtedly the most challenging race of the season, the most challenging circuit. Even if there was triple the runoff that there is around this track, I think it would still take victims because there is so many blind corners. And just so many corners.
Yeah, that's sort of like a recurring theme. So many corners, and that just makes everything that much more difficult. Especially for the drivers in the series that are here for the first time as well. Because learning this circuit is a mammoth task. Because everyone sort of knows the first few corners like the back of their hand, and then after that, the further along you go, the less knowledge you have of that section of track. Because you always get to a certain point, you're off into the wall, and then you got to start again from the beginning again. You go through that first section again, and then you learn a little bit more maybe, and then back to the beginning again. And that's just a cycle that repeats itself over and over again. And eventually you manage to start getting around the whole thing, but it's still 6.5 minutes before you make it back around to the last few corners. So it's a very tricky circuit to learn compared to something a little bit shorter like we've seen elsewhere on the schedule. Last week's race at Phoenix Oval, completely different ballgame trying to learn that circuit.
The real challenge there is the pack racing and
yeah,
the walls that this car gets close to. So I wouldn't call oval racing easy. It has its own challenges in a car like this, but it is a very, very different sort of almost left brain versus right brain difference to the Nürburgring Nordschleife. There, the challenge is the racecraft, the pack racing, and not getting, you know, bogged down and separated from the leader. Here, the bulk of the challenge, as we've seen for everyone, has been this famous circuit. To the advantage of all of our drivers is this circuit has been around all of their many and wise years. So if they're lifelong racing enthusiasts, they've had plenty of time to study up on what is undoubtedly one of the most famous, most challenging, most talked about racing and testing circuits in the world. Paul Stump certainly knows it very well because he's led every lap. His qualifying was 1.2 seconds clear of everyone else, of John Morgan, who started alongside him on the grid. And let Stump scamper away a little bit at the start of race number 1, and Stump has not looked back since. A healthy lead all race long, hardly a bobble. He comes through the final corner, and he's going to take the checkered flag for race number 1 of the season finale of 60 plus racing adventures at the Nordschleife. Russ Addy picks up a very well measured second place, and that protects his championship lead. It's going to make him a 60 plus racing adventures champion again. John Morgan completes that podium, and Bob Cohen's already taken the checkered flag as well. So now the rest of the field all work their way down the Dodingerhohe and through the final set of corners to drop the curtain on race 1 of 2.
And for all of the next drivers, just reaching the finish line is such a massive achievement, because we've seen a lot of drivers just unable to do so. Almost half the field, actually, not able to make through, at least without big incident, is the main thing about this circuit. If you can make it through cleanly, it doesn't matter how quickly you're driving, you'll end up with some pretty decent points at the end of the day. And it's not just over yet. Of course, we have got a huge grid, and it's such a massive circuit. Even a minute or so after the finish, we've still got drivers out on circuit, separated by 0.7 of a second. We're riding on board now with David Bradley, looking just ahead at Robert Love, who's definitely going to be feeling the pressure on the last lap through these final couple of corners.
Yeah, potentially. A 5-lap race, it's difficult to go a lap down. Not impossible. So that means it does take a while for everyone to come around to the checkered flag, and you did see, yeah, Robert Love and David Bradley, different confidence levels through that part of the circuit. And so, as close as they were, Robert Love has now pulled out quite a bit more through the twisty stuff, and for David Bradley, you'd want to be in that slipstream range. Love going quite slowly through the little carousel. Let's Bradley catch back up. We'll see what happens. Bradley,
it's going to be a lot closer than I thought it was going to 2 corners ago.
Yeah, it continues to surprise and perplex me a little bit. There's obviously 4 other David Bradleys who got to the iRacing service before him. It's a great point of pride to me that my iRacing account is David Haynes, and there is a David Haynes 2 getting around out there, but I got dibs first. All professional strategies here from Robert Love. Weaving the basket. David Bradley's not going to catch him as they come underneath the Bilstein Bridge downhill towards the Tiergarten.
Pressure for the braking zone though. Final time on the brakes. That number 44 is going nowhere except the finish line around the final corner. Just taking his time. No rush whatsoever for Robert Love. And takes P13, then a little bit further back from them, Douglas Beasley, who of course we saw in one of the most dramatic incidents we've seen in the race so far, just making his way onto the Dottinger, managed to get back onto the circuit and has finished.
Yep, indeed he has. I tell you what, I've not seen many Hello Kitty cars getting around in 60-plus racing adventures, but now I have. Robert Love holds on to that 13th place. Paul Stump, though, takes win number 1 with a great drive. Didn't really see any mistakes out of him. He's obviously very, very confident with this circuit. It flows through from qualifying into the race. Russ Addy had to battle and dice, and he held on to get that 2nd place. John Morgan completing the podium. Very, very strong Super 70s result there. Then got Bob Cohen, Roberto De Filippis holding on very well for that top 5. Got Ulf Olsen, Gerhardus Jorrison, Marcellus Breuning, Bob Kern, and Jerry Kerr as our top 10 from race number 1. And then Gene Moore, Mike Grandy, Robert Love, and David Bradley. We saw just 8.5 tenths to separate them. Douglas Beasley, who went through the pit lane, went on the tow truck, got back out there, wasn't able to catch them right at the end of the race. And then Eugene Clark, Earl Setzer, and Peter Hellstrom, the last drivers on the lead lap. Unfortunately, incidents that we did see for Oyvind Anderson, Franz Brink, Steve Greenwood, a big scalp for the Nordschleife, and then Leif Hellberg, Barry Hills, Mike McCormick, Richard Coulomb, Michael Bailey, and JC Hay did take the start. Michael Bailey didn't, I think, is what I see from that one. Let's have a look. Have we got any drivers standing by? We certainly do. Let's go to
quite something. So I'm
John
like, okay.
Morgan, as I rudely interrupt his conversation. But John, thank you so much for being available, joining us. Pretty exciting view in front of you all 5 laps of that race.
Yeah, it sure was. I mean, I know both Russ and Steve, and I knew they were going to be, fast enough to sort of make it that kind of a race. And after Steve pulled that pretty dramatic double draft after the first lap, I thought, well, maybe I'll just sit here and see what happens and try the same thing on the last lap. But yeah, a couple of mistakes by Steve, and that was sort of it. But it was a good second place by Russ, and Paul Stump just owns this place. So.
He did look super confident. Last day of semester kind of feeling in 60 plus racing adventures, some championships on the line there. Do you think that affected how you raced these guys, how Russ Addy was racing?
No, because it really would have taken something pretty dramatic for me to catch Russ. So I kind of knew and the same thing. It was going to take something dramatic for Paul to catch me for second. So it was, I'm just the guy that figures consistency is the best course of action most of the time. I'll take my chances or my opportunities when they appear. But, I generally won't push it quite like Steve did. Steve was pretty aggressive, and that caught up with him a little bit at the end there.
Certainly may have. There is according to iRacing, 154 corners on this layout. Were there any of them in particular that you found especially challenging today, or that are challenging for this car?
I think the place I struggle the most is I don't even know what it is, but it's when you sort of come down that straight and go back uphill, and there's a very tight left-hander and then a right-hander, and that's the slowest corner on the track, and that's typically the one that gives everybody trouble because it's the slowest corner on the track, and you just got to wrap your head around slowing down enough to make it comfortably and still get a decent exit. But that's about it. I've done so many laps here. I know the place, so that there's never any surprises, and I'm pretty comfortable here. So
60 Plus Racing Adventures has got some drivers from all around the world, which is awesome to see. For yourself, when would you say you were first aware of the existence of the Nordschleife?
Oh, probably iRacing. I mean, I think I knew about it from watching, maybe some old videos of, believe it or not, Formula One. But not, until you can get in a car in a sim like this and actually drive it, to sort of gain any appreciation for what what it is, and the complexity and the variety of corners and the concentration it takes to stay focused for that long, for 6.5 minutes a lap. It's a unique place, but I love racing here, even though the racing isn't always the best, but it's just a fun place to drive around.
Now, you've just had to keep your focus for one race, and make you focus again. How are your jobs with doing the sums? Because from where I sit, you look a very comfortable Super 70s champion, right?
Yep, I think that I locked up, and the second race is I'm pretty good at being able to sort of compartmentalize the two races, and although if I score well in the first race, there's a little pressure off, and I'm not so stressed about maybe pushing as hard in the second race. But yeah,
little birdie told me Ragnar Wisloff might be in race number 2, so best of luck to you trying to get another podium.
Thanks, looking forward to Ragnar being there.
Hope you've had a good season. Catch you around, John.
I have. Thanks, guys.
What a great chat with our Super 70s champion for season number 22. It's amazing to know that there might still be 43 more years of sim racing ahead of me. Let's get to our overall champion. If we've been as good at the sums with this as we've been with Super 70s, your second place finisher Russ Addy is with Dane Baird.
Yeah, we go from one champion to another. Second place for you today, Russ. That as far as we're concerned, at least, should guarantee you the championship. Is that correct?
I believe so. John Morgan had mentioned that as long as I showed up and ran, I'd get the championship. So yeah, finishing second definitely locks it in.
Well, so it was a fantastic finish for you, and congratulations on the championship, of course. We still got a second race coming up, so no resting on your laurels just yet. But that race, a bit of a back and forth between you and Steve Greenwood throughout that until the very end there. Just talk us through it. How are you managing that, knowing that the championship wasn't quite secured just yet? Obviously, not wanting to get in any conflict, and Nordschleife not being the easiest place to make moves.
Well, you gotta kind of give and take a little. There were times where he was coming around spots where I was kind of surprised, and you got to lift. You just got to make sure, because it's one touch and we're both out, so it's not worth the risk. But you gotta fight for your spot.
Absolutely, and then obviously the Nordschleife being an iconic circuit on the calendar as always. How much different is the mindset at this circuit compared to any of the other road courses out there on the calendar? Because obviously it's just a bit of a different beast on its own.
Oh, you have to focus so much. It's you can't relax at all. It may have on the back straight, I guess, maybe, but if you touch a curb or get in the grass, you fly off, and then you're done. So you really have to focus, especially in qualifying. If you get a 0x or a 1x in qualifying, you're at the back, it's deep trouble.
Yeah, we were mentioning that in qualifying. You've got a second qualifying session coming up again, of course, so good luck with that one and keeping it on the circuit, because even if you make a small mistake, you don't damage the car, you can carry on going, you're still positive on the delta. You go slightly wide, bang, 0x, 1x, and that lap time is deleted. So I would also like to hear about how your experience has been with the oval races on the calendar this season, because obviously very different style of racing. How have you managed with that this season?
I think I finished 4th. I won 2 races. There's a lot of good team guys that have been helping me out understanding the oval. It is completely different. Pretty exciting, a lot of wheel-to-wheel action. So it's I've been enjoying it this season.
Well, I'll let you get on and get maybe a couple more warm-up laps in before the next qualifying session in time for the second race. Yeah, it's been great talking to you, and hopefully we'll be able to get you back in here at the end of the next race.
Yeah, we'll see. Thanks for broadcasting. I do appreciate you guys doing it. And Paul is unstoppable. The guy is so fast, and John Morgan and Steve. I mean, it's just a great race. Great group of guys to race with. So I really had a good season.
Well, good luck for that second race. We'll be cheering you on from up in the comment.
Back on the Nordschleife for race number 2 of 60 plus racing adventures. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sticking with us. Championship all but wrapped up with the overall champion Russ Addy and our Super 70s champion John Morgan. Need to dive into the team's championship potentially, but this definitely looked like a really strong race. A really strong circuit for teammates Steve Greenwood and Paul Stump. Even if Greenwood did come unstuck in race number 1, does he have something to prove in race number 2? Paul Stump definitely might have something to prove. Can he go back to back and clean sweep the Nordschleife? All that to be decided in race number 2, but first, qualifying underway. And I am seeing a bit of a stronger qualifying performance potentially from our field now that they're warmed up and have had a bit more acclimatization to the Nürburgring. There's no replacement for just time and laps around here. David Haynes with you, joined by Dane Baird and our producer Joshua Lee. Dane, I'm seeing Paul Stump lighting up the timing screen still. Purple sector, purple sector, purple sector. He's not far away from potentially grabbing back-to-back pole positions.
Would you be surprised by that? Because I don't think anybody else would be. All of the drivers are agreeing on this. Paul Stump, absolutely unstoppable at the Nürburgring Nordschleife. We saw it in race number 1, just pulled away from the very beginning of the race and absolutely never looked back, just constantly extended the gap by about a second every single time by, and yeah, just completely dominant in that first race. A slight mistake in qualifying could undo all of that, because they're only going to get one opportunity with a 6.5 minute or so lap time, and there are so many opportunities to go off the circuit in the slightest place, or to just ruin the lap time if you don't invalidate it totally. So the drivers have got to be incredibly careful to ride on board with them now.
Look at the revs peak and the shift lights all come on as the car gets air over the crest at the corner there. So he now works his way through Schwalbenschwanz. This circuit really tests my memory of some of the corner names, and they're all in German as well. This one up here's got a name as well. But it was a scene of a couple of crashes in the first race, wasn't it? You can't go flat out across that first segment, but you really want to carry your speed through there, because then you're flat out through the downhill right-hander in a car like this. You carry that speed all the way down the Dottinger Hohe. There are whole other racetracks shorter than this Dottinger Hohe. I reckon it's about a Sukuba and a half long.
I have never ever heard anyone use Sukuba as a circuit, like as a measuring tool before, but I love it. We need to do that with every single racetrack now, is figure out how long it is in terms of Sukubas. That's just fantastic. But yeah, the straight is the main talking point.
Because Sukubas are nice round 2 kilometers, so we're 11.25 Sukubas long around here as the drivers on their big flying laps complete them now. And
wow.
Surprise and surprise, Paul Stump remains at the top, a 6:28.9. Another great qualifying performance from John Morgan, though, as he goes second, only half a second back. So he's really shaved the difference from qualifying 1, where it was 1.2 seconds. And I've got the, what are there, 10, 11, 12 sectors around this circuit up on my timing screen. And Russ Addy had the purple first sector, really committed start to his lap through Sabina Schmidt's curve and the Hutzenbach. Paul Stump then went purple second, third, fourth, fifth and sixth sectors, so really strong through that part of the lap. John Morgan, though, actually went and pinched purple sectors in 7, 8 and 9. So I'm guessing that is a lot of the section between the carousel and maybe the start of the Dottinger Hohe. So John Morgan really strong through there. 3 consecutive sectors quicker than Paul Stump. But then Paul Stump managed to get the purple final sector. So the end, that's got to be from the Billstone Bridge to the timing line. He was really, really quick through there. So all things considered, Paul Stump on the pole position, but he wasn't fastest through every sector. John Morgan and Russ Addy took some away from him, and those guys are going to start second and third, as you see on your timing column. And Bob Cohen, fourth. Ragnar Wisloff joins us for race number 2, a previous time champion, and he is 5th as they run at the moment. Drivers get 10 minutes, which of course is just the 1 lap here on the Nordschleife, and there are 17 drivers now so far with a qualifying time, and I don't think anyone else is going to get around in time. I don't have quite the right timing screen page up. Roberto De Filippis, what he's done is complete 1 flying lap, carried on onto the second one, but it doesn't take a mathematician to see he's not going to complete this in the next 10 seconds.
Yeah, no, I mean, if he did, that would be incredibly impressive, and we'd all have to
it'd be
start
pole, wouldn't it?
figuring out. Yeah, we polled by a good couple of minutes, so yeah, not going to be able to complete that lap time. So the grid is set then for the second race, and yeah, no surprises at all. Who's going to be up there on the top for anyone?
No, but what is interesting to see is, as I said, that margin has been significantly trimmed down. Stump was on pole for race number 1 by 1.2 seconds. Still, not a ridiculous margin around this circuit, and it's 22.8 kilometers and it's 6.5 minutes. But even less, John Morgan, pretty punchy in that one and only flying lap, one shot, one opportunity kind of qualifying, where you'd think to hold something back and make sure you do get to complete your lap so you don't start back a grid. But he gave it a red hot go, and he starts a lot closer to Paul Stump for race number 2. Champion-elect Russ Addy starting out a third there, and then Bob Cohen, Ragnar Wisloff, Marcellus Breuning, row number 3 there. You got Ulf Olsen, Barry Hills, Greta De Filippis, and Mike McCormick is our top 10. Peter Holstrom and Bob Kern start on row number 6.
And then in 13th position, Eugene Clark alongside Richard Coulomb. He'll be looking to have a bit of a better time up there than what he found in the first race. Mike Grandy alongside JC Hay, Douglas Beasley alongside Steve Greenwood, who's starting a lot further back and wasn't able to get a lap time in. El Setzer in 19th alongside Robert Love. Then Jahadis Jorison, David Bradley, Oyvind Anderson, and Jerry Kerr rounding out your top 12 rows.
Jin Moore in 25th there. This is a look backwards from the rear bumper of our pace car. Doesn't have to do a whole lot of work here at the Nordschleife. The whole field, as you can see, lined up at the tourist pits. Pace car's just got a something I was saying before I was interrupted. Is that Paul Stump is going to lead them through. The pace car is in, and once again he gets a pretty early jump, and he's going to lead the field to the start of this race. Tyres in a much different condition to how they finished race number 1. They're cold, they're grippy, but they're snappy for the start of race number 2 as they go downhill, picking up speed towards the Hudson-Bach. Your field led once again by Paul Stump. John Morgan converting that great qualifying form into second place, but once again almost letting Stump off the leash, letting him get away. Russ Addy and Bob Cohen, 3rd and 4th, running in 3rd and 4th. And Ragnar Wisloff's dropped one position, so Marcellus Breuning's maybe jumped him in 5th and 6th. Your whole field like a snake out of the exit of that tight and twisty Hudson-Bach section, up the hill towards the floodplats. Car gets light right at the turning point for a super quick double apex right-hander, and your speed out of there, oh so important. Positions can be made here. We saw that in race number 1, Dane.
Yeah, and you can see on the timing page, as you were saying in qualifying as well, obviously you've got a driver who is incredibly quicker than anyone else through most of this first half of the circuit, and he's just able to extend that advantage over and over and over again throughout the sections in the first lap, and once he's gone, so difficult to catch him.
absolutely. So looking at Bruining right in behind Cohen. Ragnar Wisloff, has he switched up his livery? He has a little bit. It's a fresh lick of paint. Oh, that Ulf Olsen across the grass, like we saw him do in race number 1. And again, he keeps it off the Armco. He only runs off the circuit in places that there's a generous helping of grass. But what it probably is going to do is cost him position. Olsen was purple in sector number 2, and it might have been because he missed his braking marker. Oh dear. Here is Ragnar Wisloff, a previous time champion. Only seems to be champion in the winter time because that boat of his seems to occupy him a little bit too much in the summer. It must be nice. He's got a good view in front of him though. You've got to be careful through these quick corners. The dirty air is in effect in these cars. It can push you out wider than you thought. It can also lead to you carrying more speed into the corners than you would have had maybe in qualifying or practice as you pick up the slipstream, arrive at these committed corners faster, and then find, as you do, that you got less grip than you were looking for. But there's a problem here for Eugene Clark. It's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, unfortunately for Clark there. Carries on going though. Doesn't look like there's a whole lot of damage to the car, which is always good. Now, was it just a self-mistake, or has there been a little bit of contact here into the corner? There has been a little bit of contact. He's helped around by the number 12. That's Mike Grandy just getting into the back of him ever so slightly. A bit of a lock-up beforehand as well. But he just waits for the cars to get back going again. And he will continue on his way. Yeah, just maybe looking for a move that wasn't there, or just a little bit deep into the braking zone from Mike Grandy, and that's going to turn him around. I did want to say about Ragnar Wilsoff.
Was that the section of corners that John Morgan described as the most difficult on the circuit? He was talking about the really slow part of the track, and for me, that's one of the slowest corners there is.
I think it is the slowest corner on the circuit. Because I think with the carousel, you can carry more speed around it just because of the banking. I think that's definitely the only place that I ever have to get into first gear in a car. Maybe that's just me being a slow driver, but definitely the only place I have to get into first gear on the corners. Interestingly, unless my eyes are deceiving me, Paul Stump has lost all of his gap.
It's underneath the second. I'm seeing John Morgan potentially picking up the slipstream. So important in places like this. It's quick and uphill right here. You want to get close before you get towards the dotting Ahura. This is also the part of the lap that John Morgan was quick in qualifying. You've had a little bit of a problem at the carousel for Roberto De Filippis, the driver from Club Italy. Has he been too aggressive? Has he lost the rear jumping out at the carousel? A bit further up the field though, Morgan dropping back a little bit from Paul Stump, under pressure from Russ Addy. So this is the part of the lap Morgan was very competitive with some purple sectors in qualifying. See if he can keep that up. I'd probably foolishly be tempted to push on through this part of the lap just to make sure I could be within a second when it sort of all straightens out a little bit after the little carousel and you go down the dotting Ahura and you've got the best opportunity to maybe make some overtakes.
Yeah, for sure. It's it definitely could be a wise move, that one. Let's see, in towards the carousel, what's going to happen with the Philippus here.
So, into the carousel, can upset the car. You're sort of half in one, half in the other, and he's just... I think it happens in some cars. You go too quick through the carousel, and what happens is rather than going wide, you're far more likely to lose the rear like he did. I don't think he got any help from behind. 1.6 seconds. Paul Stump's managed to pull over John Morgan, who is in a vulnerable position. Russ Addy following his wheel tracks down the straight. The dotting Ahura initially goes a little bit downhill. The speed builds up, the aero drag builds up, and then it starts to flick back uphill, and that's where the driver behind really starts to get a speed advantage. 255 kilometers an hour for John Morgan, but it's 262 for Russ Addy as he looks to slingshot past. More dramas back in the field for Gerhardus Jorrison. 3 wheels on his wagon is not going to get him good speed down the dotting Ahura, and it is going to need the tow truck. So for Russ Addy, he does jump up in a second. John Morgan holds position in third. That little leapfrog maneuver though closed them a tiny bit on Paul Stump. Can Russ Addy push on to try to close that gap, to try to challenge the Stump supremacy?
Well, it's definitely a lot closer than it was this time in the first race. As a couple more drivers lower down the field, 9th and 10th making their way through the right-hander. Here's what happened to the hardest Jorison. Yeah.
Get out of my head. Here he goes. So he's looking at a defensive line from the driver in front. He runs wide. That very famous bit of grass, someone actually tags him there as well, which is where half the damage comes from, ripping the wheel off. I want to say, Mike Grandy also had some problems. JC Hay and Ivan Anderson, yeah, I think there as well.
Yeah.
So that corner claiming some scalps, race 1 and race 2. 1.7 seconds the lead for Paul Stump. Russ Addy safe from John Morgan at the minute. And they've all dropped Bob Cohen, who could start to come under some pressure from Ragnar Wisloff, who's gotten around Marcellus Broining for 5th. And I gotta look. Doesn't look like Steve Greenwood took the start of the race, so I was wondering if he was going to work his way very rapidly up through the field, but the answer to that is quite solidly no, unfortunately.
Yep, only the 23 cars taking to the grid for race number 2. And a couple of those, unfortunately, already out into the pit lane as well after the first lap. Couple of incidents involved there, but just that one that started off with Jorison there, just taking out a whole bunch of drivers that were all just in a big pack going through the final corner before the Dottinger, and a big pile up, and not a whole lot you can do there really, because it's quite a narrow part of the circuit, which is already a narrow circuit, and the walls are so close on either side. There's literally nowhere you can go.
No, absolutely nowhere. No runoff, no space to save it. The Armco is always ever present around this track. Here is Ragnar Wisloff in the, it's like team colours. Did get initially on the race start passed by Marcellus Broining, and then I'd say probably on the Dottinger last lap he's gotten back to 5th place, which is where he qualified. He's not far behind, being able to maybe pick off Bob Cohen in front. As you can see from this shot, he's almost as close to Cohen as he is from dropping Broining.
Yep, absolutely. Here is, two cars going very close together. There's going to be a move almost being made there by the number 12 of Grandy there, as these two drivers make their way through this part of the section, open over in the braking zone. What has happened there?
It's a really big braking zone there. So we are going to have another look. Is it a case of being unsighted, missing your braking marker because you're so close to the driver in front? Difference in speed. Oh, and Mike Grandy just launches over the Hello Kitty mobile, and that's not so pretty. This doesn't look, like a brake check or particularly early from Robert Love. That's about where I'd want to start slowing for that corner, because you can't brake too late. The track drops away, you lock up so easily, you're turning as well, which limits how much you can brake. So that's about right. I think unfortunately he's just got in too late, too hot.
And that was a bit of grass there for the 177 of Morgan. Little bit interesting, just keeping him aware of his surroundings a bit there. Emerges from the trees and making his way through. It must be his favourite part of the circuit, just because if anyone's favourite part of the Nordschleife is not this part of the circuit, then you're just wrong. because it is definitely the best part. And absolutely lighting up timing screens and qualifying as well. So hopefully he'll be able to catch up a little bit of that gap he's just given to Russ Addy by making that small error. We'll see them close back up again. Otherwise, we may just end up having a repeated podium from race number 1.
Is it everyone's favorite part of the track is how many YouTube videos are there of BMW M3s being written off?
Oh yeah, this is
It's a big data set to sample from as well, so your confidence bars are good on that.
Maybe not the people who wrote off the BMW's favourite part of the circuit. A very expensive part of the circuit, that's for sure.
It's a warrior's death to meet the Armco at the Nordschleife. I think that's honourable. It's Ragnar Wisloff not able to close in on Bob Cohen as much as he might have wanted. Broining in the slipstream, you can kind of see the numbers tumbling as Broining starts to pick up the slipstream.
Oh.
Ragnar Wisloff's going to have to hold his line here, but maybe not close enough, maybe not in time.
Really funny, you can see on the steering wheel the dash lights start to just blink away as they make their way up the hill. Oh, they're going to go side by side. Oh, and he holds on.
A metre closer coming onto the straight, and he would have got it. I'd written him off, but he got really, really close, and I shouldn't have written him off when there was still fully a third of a Tsukuba to go.
Getting a little bit close to the grass on the left-hand side there, coming out through the long right-hander. And onto the Nottinger they will go. David Bradley closely followed by Eugene Clark. You'd expect the move to be made here, just 3/10 of the gap.
Absolutely would. A bit closer, more speed here for Eugene Clark. Looks to get on by. I don't think David Bradley made that especially difficult. He might be missing some straight line speed from a little tweak here or there, because I don't think that's the speed they're meant to do.
Definitely was missing a couple lights on the dash there, that's for sure.
That'll ruin your Christmas. Second place man, as he has a bit of a lock-up, as happens so easily with the amount of undulation and elevation change around this circuit. It's not just, you know, up and down these straights, it's through a lot of the corners as well. You get this vertical curvature right as you're looking to brake, right as you're looking to turn in, or right as you're looking for stability on the exit of the corner. It happens at a bunch of the places around here. Hang on, I'm doing some research.
Westhoff and Broining. Their way through here. Nearly swapping places last time by. They're getting really loose on the exits. I wonder if the tyres are already starting to struggle a bit with all the corners that they're having to face, because we talked about in race number 1, the tyres will eventually start to drop off nearer to the end of the race, but when you're going through all of the medium to high speed corners at the Nordschleife as well, it's not loads of smaller corners, it's loads of quick ones too. One of the tyres might just be going off a little bit quicker than usual, because quite a lot of sliding going on from especially Broining just behind there.
Oh, you know what's ruined my day?
Uh-oh.
I just found, you know, what is the elevation difference between the lowest point and the highest point of the Nordschleife, and I was ready to gloat that as impressive as this circuit is, it's not as much as Mount Panorama Bathurst. But you know what?
Oh no.
We see a problem here for the 61 of Broining. The Nürburgring does have just a little more elevation change.
A couple more issues in the broadcasting booth as we're back for now. But I was just asking David just a little bit of a difference in elevation change, because I've just done my research. It's double.
What? No, I've got 320 meters for the Nordschleife. That would be the difference between the tiefste Punkt at Breitscheid and the Hohe Acht at Hohe Acht. And I've got that as 320 meters for the Nordschleife. It's 200 for Bathurst. What number do you have for Bathurst?
I've got 574 feet. And I've got the Nürburgring at 1,000 feet.
Yeah, I've got the Nürburgring at 1,000 feet. I think 500 is the elevation above sea level of the start-finish line.
So my source is incredibly inaccurate then. That's all good. It's all good.
My source is my incredibly stiff calf muscles every time I go to the Bathurst 12 hour. That could just be a result of, you know, sleeping on air mattresses in tents as well, though. Lap 3 of 5, 74, all stump. Leading this one as he led race number 1. Problems for John Morgan, though. Was running in 3rd place. He's dropped out. Gives a handy little gap to Russ Addy. Moves Bob Cohen into 3rd. And I don't think we're going to see anything dramatic here. And I think the dramatic thing is that we're not going to see any... No, gets the little carousel just wrong. Pops out of the groove. And leaves his own mark on that Armco as others have before.
Add that to another reason why I dislike that corner. I don't think I've ever gone through that corner and felt like I've got it right. You either feel like you've gone too slow and your exit's terrible, or you've gone too fast and you popped off the side of it like we just saw there.
Compared to the exit of the carousel proper, it is tough because the fastest line sees you flick out of that groove right at the exit to use all of the track out of the road. But it's such a precise little window, where you, if you're really pushing on, really trying to maximize that corner, you are so at risk of, you know, losing your grip on the merry-go-round and getting flung out like that. That is a real shame for our Super 70s champ. Puts a lot of daylight in these battles up front. Russ Addy not able to chip away at Paul Stump. Cohen not able to chip away at him, and been sort of maybe almost grandstanding for Ragnar Wisloff to think about chipping away at Bob Cohen, but that hasn't happened. It was a second and a half. Now it's pretty much on 2.
Yeah, and just making his way through. Not quite able to close up as quickly as we might have expected him to. Cohen doing a good job out there in that 4th position. Just trying to look a little bit further back and seeing a couple of drivers separated. Well, not a whole lot between the two of them. Slightly further back. Is that Morgan back out onto the circuit, am I seeing? Or I am.
Indeed, John Morgan's back out on track in the 13th place there with a spare car. Well, the thing with that is the penalty you pay is kind of exponential on how far from the end of the lap you crashed. If you crash in this first sector, you're going to lose 5 minutes. If you crash there just before the dotting a you're maybe going to lose 2 minutes. So you see, he's rejoined the race in 13th place, not far behind David Bradley the 5th. And it's on here for the final podium spot now.
Yep, just over the last couple sectors or so, just catching right up to the back of him. We'll see how this battle evolves. They've got 1.5 laps to go, but 2 times down that long Dottinger, and that's really the most important part. It's all over the back of Cohen and his whistle there. You can see him moving left and right, just filling up the mirrors of the driver in front of him. They've got plenty of time to the cars behind as well, so zero need to worry about losing time battling. And we might be able to see something done here. He moves to the outside. They're going to go side by side here.
Oh, not a place you normally go side by side at Kesselchen there. There are some cars that even have to lift to get through there. Looks like and managed to pull it off. Ragnar Wisloff to the 3rd position and carrying good speed through the corner that follows. Tough to pass anyone between here and Schwalbenschwanz. So a great time to make that move if you think you've got more speed, more advantage. He runs a little wide at the corner afterwards, but again, doesn't matter too badly. So Ragnar Wisloff, 3rd place now.
Always just funny watching drivers make their way up towards the carousel from that camera angle, because you can see them take sort of like a middle to right view on the camera's view at least, when you should be expecting to go all the way to the left to try and, you know, get back onto the racing line and open up the corner as much as possible. So you see them cut down to the other side and you're thinking, hang on a second, what's going on here? They're just trying to get down onto the banking for the carousel. Now this is going to be interesting because Wisloff has got ahead in quite possibly one of the most inconvenient parts of the circuit, because he's got this fun section here and then he's got Cohen 6/10 back onto the Dottinger. So we'll see. We'll see if Cohen can hang on through this part of the circuit, and if he can, he might just be able to get straight back by again.
I've been looking at the points championship for this season. How it works is 2 drivers team up, and it looks like the team points is a combination of the 8 best results from each teammate. So Euro Racing Motors, of course, Paul Stump and Steve Greenwood, we picked that one out in race number 1. Both of them have been pretty strong this season. Equal points tally from the both of them in that scoring method. Puts Euro Racing Motors, I say, pretty comfortably ahead of Mighty Raven, which is Donald Fitterer and Mike McCormick. Now, both of them were here, but aren't running inside of the top 10. And you can see McCormick a retirement in 22nd place in this race as well. So they're not going to overhaul there, and I don't think. And R&R Racing, which currently sit 3rd in the championship coming into this round, is Russ Addy and Randy Shoemake. Now, Russ Addy's doing well, but he's not scoring more points and big more points than Paul Stump. And Randy Shoemake also not managing to outscore there. So Paul Stump, this is a great finish to the season, the way it runs at the moment. He's about to start the final lap of the race. And it's also good for the team points. I don't think anyone's going to catch Euro Racing Motors the way it sits at the moment. Bob Cohen going to be able to catch Ragnar Wisloff. They're still super close here as they're also going to start the final lap.
think you've just done more maths than I've done in the last year. Right there. So, congratulations on that. But yeah, as you're saying, brilliant way to end the season for Stump. Out in front, possibly got a double win on the cards right here, just to like secure his utter dominance at this circuit. He's still extending the gap out in front as well.
Third place is the excitement zone at the moment in 60 plus racing adventures. Ragnar Wisloff has picked off that third place, but the slipstream's pretty strong in these Indy Pro 2000 cars. Bob Cohen in the tow, picking up and not looking like he's game to try to steal this one away. Is it because he doesn't want to take the risk, or because he thinks that the Dodingahoa is going to be the place to make a move on the last lap? History would say moves have been made on the final lap down the Dodingahoa before. It's a little bit of the curb at Arenberg there. Big curbs on the Nordschleife. This car, no likey. So that stalled his progress out on the exit just a little bit.
It's always risky not going for a move you can make with the hopes of getting a better opportunity later down the line. Especially at the Nordschleife where it's so easy to make a mistake. But that is the opportunity of all opportunities. If you can get within half a second of the car in front down there, it's almost guaranteed that you're going to be able to just drive straight by them. So it's a risky game that Cohen's playing. It's a game that I've played many, many times. And often lose. But yeah,
it's turning down Jennifer Lawrence while you wait for Taylor Swift to get back to you about a date, isn't it?
As I listen to our producer in the background, just losing it at that one. Oh,
men can dream.
You've done it. You've finally done it. It's taken what, 2 seasons of this, maybe 3.
I've even hurt myself psychologically with that one. Paul Stump, very handy gap there of 5 seconds, more than what he had in race number 1, and probably just managing it at this point. There's no need to push so hard to get a 10 or a 15 second gap when 5 will do the trick. It teases Russ Addy. He can see him, but he will not get any of that slipstream that is oh so powerful in this car. This looks like it must be a good section of the track for Ragnar Wisloff, because it's where he passed Bob Cohen last lap, and it's where he's dropping Cohen on this lap. 1.2 seconds. You can maybe just get a crumb of draft up here, but it doesn't seem like it's working for Cohen.
Yeah, Cohen kind of dropping back a little bit there, and unless he can close up that gap through this part of the circuit, which I think Wisloff is probably slightly stronger at, he's not going to have too much of a fun time down at Dottinger. But Wisloff maybe trying to take it a little bit easier, just losing about 7/10 of a second there, and that time still dropping, so Cohen straight back into things already.
Yeah, wow. Things can change pretty quickly around here. That was a millimetre from disaster for Bob Cohen. The understeer, the slide, he could see the grass and then the Armco coming towards him. At the highest point of the circuit, it was nearly the lowest point of his race. He saves it. He just stays within the slipstream of Ragnar Wisloff through this really technical, flowing, unsighted section. The curbs are never-ending around here. Places like Brunchen, Ice Curve, the end of many a race, the end of many a sports car. Ragnar Wisloff pushing on, has a big slide. He knows he wants to be a second clear by the time they get to the Dodingahoa. It's setting up for that next phase of the track, trying to carry the speed through the corners to be clear when you get to the straight. Big commitment around there. Here is your race leader, team's champion as well. And while it's not been the race that his teammate Steve Greenwood would want, I think Paul Stump is showing why the combination of Greenwood and Stump has been so difficult for any other two drivers to combine and match. Oh, a problem! Ragnar Wisloff around the small carousel. Kleiner's carousel claims another victim. Bob Cohen's going to go through in a third. Any damage for Wisloff? He looks like he might be okay. They had a lot of gap. Back to Barry Hills in fifth. Paul Stump, though, flat out. Everything he can get from his Indy Pro 2000 down the long Zottinghur. He's got one more braking zone, I'd say, to bring this one home.
How many laps can you fit down the Dottinger?
Oh, it's like, you know, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. There's a lot, that's for sure. And as he elegantly guided it to 2 pole positions and race win in race number 1, Paul Stump, unmatched, unchallengeable at the Nordschleife. The cleanest of clean sweeps. That podium going to be completed by Russ Addy in second, Bob Cohen a surprise third place. And Ragnar Wisloff did manage to recollect himself for fourth, but his race nearly ended at the Kleiner's Carousel. The rest of the field come towards the checkered flag. Let's look at Ragnar Wisloff. Third place, really pushing through Schwalbenschwanz in the Kleiner's Carousel, this sector here, trying to make sure he was a second clear of the driver behind. He just catches the exit wrong.
So unfortunate.
A millimetre to the left, he'd have stayed in the banking. A millimetre to the right, he would have jumped clean and clear of it. He just high sides and rotates the car on the crown between the banking and the flat stuff.
Yeah, such a tricky part of the circuit to get right, and when you're pushing really hard to try and not lose position on the final lap, yeah, those things are bound to happen. And yeah, just really, really unfortunate, especially considering, of course, Ragnar not doing race number 1, so he's coming in fairly fresh compared to anyone else.
Wow. Very interesting set of races at the Nordschleife for race number 2. Nordschleife does what it does. The gaps can look big, but that's the challenge of this circuit. 154 corners to master. Paul Stump, every single one of them well within his abilities, and they tried. John Morgan closed the qualifying deficit for race number 2, but unfortunately he also got bitten by the Kleiner's Carousel. Paul Stump, perfect, takes the win from Russ Addy and Bob Cohen. Ragnar Wisloff surviving a little heart attack there to get 4th. And Barry Hills, Bob Kern, Peter Hallstrom, Roberto De Filippis surviving his problem at the big carousel to get back to 8th place. Richard Coulomb and John Morgan are the top 10. Rest of our results then: Eugene Clark, David Bradley, Oyvind Anderson, JC Hay, Jerry Kerr, Gene Moore, Ulf Olsen. For Marcellus Bruining, unfortunately, his race cut short. Curtis Yorison, likewise. Problems there. The corner coming to the Dottinghur, memory serves. Mike Grandy gets 20th place after collision with Robert Love. And Mike McCormick, Douglas Beasley, both pretty early retirements in this one.
Well, with the race results over, we will await some of the drivers as they will make their way over to have a bit of a chat with us after a pretty good race number 2. didn't have quite so much back and forth up near the front as we did in race number 1. There's a couple of incidents a little bit earlier on in the race, unfortunately, so a couple of larger gaps in the race, but you still have a good couple of drivers waiting for a chat.
Forgive me, yes we do. Let's get that unquestionable champion, Russ Addy, back with us again. 2 podiums, solid results. So, it's not easy. John Morgan was with you, he had problems. Behind you, dramas for Ragnar Wisloff.
Yeah, they were right there, and then they got a little gap. But I'll tell you what, Paul had one little mistake, and I thought we were going to be close to him, but he's just amazing on this track.
Yeah, absolutely. He clean swept that qualifying, he's clean swept these races, every lap led to. Conditions the same race 1 to race 2, but I see that you picked up half a second on your fastest lap, and so did quite a bit of the field.
I just think that it's, you get whatever it is, 5 laps of practice in at high speed, you kind of get better the second run. It felt the same, but yeah, it was just a little quicker.
Much difference, balance of the car wise from lap 1 to lap 5?
I didn't feel like too much. When we were practicing earlier, it was a little slippery on lap 1, but both these races, it felt pretty neutral, so there wasn't a whole lot of a change, no.
Have you got at least a rough draft on your championship acceptance speech?
No, I just thank everybody I race with, because it is a great group of guys, and it's just an honor to run with them every week.
Acceptance accepted. we had such a good chat after race number 1. It's tough for me to find much to pick your brain about in race number 2, but obviously no signs of 60+ racing adventures slowing down. That's the curtain on amazingly season 22 of this championship. A lot of history to it, and you pencil your name to another chapter.
Yeah, it's a 3rd championship, which to me is pretty shocking. The group that we have are so fast. Fortunately, some of the past champions didn't run every race, so that helped me out. But you got to beat everybody that shows up.
Are you going to refute my scandalous and baseless allegations that you're a mole inside the Scandinavian Weather Bureau?
No, but we do need a lot of wind for Ragnar, so he has to race his boats, and then won't be here. 2 weeks ago, he had no wind, so he showed up for both races.
It's amazing what can affect the racing. This championship seems to quite commonly come to the Nordschleife, and not immediately the track you think of with this kind of car.
It's a really well balanced car on this track. It's you push hard into the corners, and it's not, I'll say, it's not evil. There's some tracks that the car is just a handful. Here, once you get in a rhythm and you get you get into a pattern, it's fairly neutral. So it's actually a good track. Although we seem to be, I think, at Watkins Glen a lot at the end too.
Yeah, there's a couple tracks, Road Atlanta, Watkins Glen, the Nordschleife, that just seem to be a feature of every single season. So I'll ask you, is there a track that we don't see a whole lot that you might like to see more of?
Yeah, there's some like Barber that's very good. Some smaller tracks, Summit's fun, and there's that new track coming that's, I think, just down the road from Ragnar. So that ought to be interesting to do.
Yeah, Rundskolen or something. Free content as well, so maybe that puts it on the short list.
Yeah, hopefully.
Well, Russ, congratulations from us to you once again, showing them how the championship's put together. And 3. You're starting to build out that trophy cabinet.
Thanks. And as I always say, I do well when you guys broadcast, so keep up the good work. You guys are fantastic.
I'm not sure there's causation to that correlation, but we'll take it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to thank my teammates, Randy, and the guys at TNT Racing. They helped me out with the normal official ones with sets, Everett and those guys. It's just a great group to run with.
Ross Addy, you're champion, twice on the podium now as well. Dane is over with Bob Cohen.
Yeah. Hey, how you doing? Thanks for bringing me on.
Well, you finished in the top 3.
Yeah, I'm pretty thrilled.
It would be rude of us not to bring you up into here. It was just as soon as you came for us. So, P3, not too bad for you at the Nordschleife of all circuits.
Well, the competition is pretty fierce, so I would have been happy with the 4th, and Ragnar to just be running with him was exciting. And I don't know what happened. He just lost a little grip, but I was pushing him really hard. He knew I was going to lay into him on that back straightaway, and I, caught up at the very end, so I was kind of sitting in the right position. So it was going to be a dogfight anyway, but when he lost it, that was beautiful for me. I could relax for the rest of the lap and finish 3rd. Fantastic season.
And then, obviously, the end of the season here, in season 22, how was your championship overall? How would you rate the whole experience in this 22nd season?
Well, to get in the top, 5 in this league is, it's satisfying because it's just such a fantastic group of racers, really committed. I've been racing with these guys for years. We push each other and respect each other for the most part. There's a little bit of, it's racing, but we all love the same thing. The sim racing is really fantastic. So, yeah, it's been a great season, and I'm not sure whether I came in 5th or hopefully 4th, but, I really would like to get on the podium on that championship, and I'd really like to win the championship. But believe me, if you're going to win the championship in 60 plus, you better have the right stuff across the board because it's not easy.
And just a word about the rest of the drivers that you've been driving up against. Obviously, you've had some great battles on track here at the Nürburgring. Obviously, Ragnar joining us for a couple of rounds at the end of the championship. What do you think about all the drivers that you've been racing up against throughout the entire season? Because obviously, they're really what makes the series what it is.
Well, Russ Addy is, unbelievable driver. Paul Stump, you saw how he just dominated on this track. I don't know what his level of racing is, but I know he's the king of this particular track. Ragnar, John Morgan, the Gentleman Racer of the Year every year. These are quality guys, and when you get close and are honored enough to get in and start mixing it up, they leave you room. They know.
They race for, different reasons than all of these young whippersnappers. There are some pretty damn young people on iRacing, and I guess the outside perception is it kind of is a young person's game, if you will, but it's awesome to see what are sometimes some really big groups. We've had 40 plus car grids in 60 plus racing adventures, and there are plenty of well-seasoned drivers getting around on iRacing. They love to race in this championship, and all of them have some really sort of interesting perspectives and history on racing. There are some members that been sort of maybe club racing 40 years, and maybe it reached time to hang up the helmet. They're here on 60 plus racing adventures, racing against each other week after week through the championship. Great camaraderie, the same guys every week, and very similar, motivations and experiences, but quite commonly from some, diverse nationalities and regions. So that's awesome. And you can find 60 plus racing adventures on the iRacing forum. If you are approaching 60 or older to join with this great community, and that's what they call themselves, definitely a community of racers. So at the end of season 22, after a really challenging set of races at the Nordschleife, we've got to extend our congratulations to Super 70s champion John Morgan, Teams champions Euro Racing Motors, and your overall champion Russ Addy. 12-week season, and they've all risen to week after week, deliver their best, and claim those accolades. Thanks for joining us on RaceSpotTV. Make sure you are following us across our Discord, our Facebook, and our Twitter, and subscribed on YouTube or wherever you may be watching. I've been David Haynes, stay in bed with me, and produced by Joshua Lee. Hope to see you in the future for more 60+ racing adventures.